Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another session of Tap Talk Live. This is our 10th Tap Talk here in Malta, and today we're going to focus on microplastics. So we're going to look at what is a microplastics, what's the danger with microplastics, and are they present in the water, and if so, what can you do about them? So let's start with what are microplastics. So the research I've done, most people will define microplastics as a piece of plastic that is smaller than 5 millimeters. Obviously 5 millimeters is very small, but most organizations are defining less than 5 millimeters. There's also something called nanoplastics or and these are much smaller than that. But today we're just going to focus on microplastics as a start. And it really is quite new information that we're getting on microplastics because it's not something that's been talked about for a long time. And so really it's quite new science and new evidence. So, for your information, 5 millimeters, we often talk of microns. So in filtration, we talk of microns, and a micron is 1,000th of a millimeter. So really at 5 millimeters or less than 5 millimeters, a microplastic is 5,000 microns. So what does that mean? Because until I did the research, I didn't really envisage how big a micron was. Well, a bacteria is something between 1 and 10 microns as an example. Spider's silk, somewhere between 3 and 8 microns. So this is pretty small stuff, not visible to the human eye. And even a fungus strand, a strand of the mycelium fungus, around 10 microns. So just for comparison, there's something you can see. A human hair is somewhere between 17 to 181 microns. So microplastics vary in size, and they're quite big. And in a minute, we're going to go and look at where do they come from. But let's first of all start off with the tap water filters are filtering to between 1 and 2 microns. So that will eliminate your microplastics as well as many other substances. But today we're just talking about microplastics. So 1 to 2 microns you'll be down to. Okay, so there's the National Geographic were good, I think, in defining microplastics in 2 different types. So the first are primary microplastics. Now these are microplastics that are added intentionally into something. And in particular, something I didn't know that was quite so prevalent is microbeads. So these are small pieces of plastic that are added into cosmetic products, for instance, such as facial scrubs and things like that. And obviously, once you use a facial scrub, that then goes into the water system, then goes into drainage, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's already in our system. So this is plastic that we intentionally add in to a product. And the second thing the National Geographic pointed out was the secondary plastic. So this is plastic that we haven't intentionally put into our system. This is plastic that is just breaking down from all the larger bits of plastic that is left around, either in marine life, for instance, in the sea or in agricultural areas and things like that. Okay, so we already see in Malta, there's plenty of plastic around. We see it all the time in all sorts of places, from the beach to the country to the streets. And when this plastic breaks down, in particular, take a street, a car runs over it, it's going to start breaking down, or it's in the heat, you will end up with bits of small bits of microplastics. Now, the question is, what is the problem with this? And at the moment, the research is quite early, but microplastics take hundreds of years to degrade. And this is straight from the research I did on the European Chemicals Agency. So if microplastics takes hundreds of years to degrade, if you've got them in your body, it doesn't even sound like a good thing. So that is the main focus of the issue. We don't really know what the issue is. And there is plenty of research being done, or some more research being done, on what the effect is on human bodies. There have been some tests on other living organisms, and the research is still sort of very early, and there's not loads of it available. Now, it's also interesting to note that there is, as yet, so we're now at 2022, there is no legislation for microplastics and nanoplastics as contaminants in food, not yet anyway. There is some research. Sorry, I seem to have lost the mic there. I apologize for that. So there is going to be some research about about intentional primary microplastics that are entered into the system, microbeads entered into consumer products. So that's going to be out at some point. But there isn't anything about testing for microplastics or legislating for it in food or water at the moment. However, the European Food Agency has pointed out that in 2019, it is a really big concern from their Eurobarometer. So what are people worried about? What are consumers worried about? Actually, consumers are worried about this. So that was a nice piece of research there, because people don't know what the impact is of microplastics, but they do know that they are present. So finally, the Food Agency got round to having a big colloquium, so a scientific gathering, which was in early part of May 2021, so just over a year ago, a coordinated approach to assess the human risks of micro and nanoplastics in food. So in fact, what they decided at that colloquium was and apologies if I lost the mic again. I do seem to have some mic issues that I'll be trying to solve for next time. So in that colloquium, one of the presentations that was interesting was a presentation from well to bottle, identifying the sources of microplastics in drinking water. So I was quite interested in that one, and reading through the whole of that presentation, there were two takeaways that I thought were interesting. So the first one was that over 50% of the microplastics that was found in bottled water, over 50% were greater than 11 microns. So that's already sort of quite big. We define microplastics as 5,000 microns or 5 millimeters. 11 microns, you know, these are not tiny small pieces. These are 11 microns. If you're filtering to 2 microns, you know, 11 microns is already quite big. So the most of the plastic, the other thing in that talk was, this wasn't about, do you find microplastics in bottled water? This was a talk about, there is microplastics in bottled water, and this is what we found about it. So that was the first thing. They're actually quite big pieces, and there's plenty of them. And the other thing is that I found interesting, the screwing and unscrewing of the caps is the greatest source of microplastics in bottled water. So we know, generally speaking, do not reuse your single-use plastic bottles. And that's an obvious thing now. Primarily, don't use your single-use plastic bottles, because even when you open them, you're actually, it looks like from this research, you're putting your microplastics in your water as you open them. Most people, when I go and see them, you know, they talk about why they're getting rid of plastic bottles, and it's things like, they point out, especially in Malta, that outside the store where you go and buy your plastic bottle of water, your plastic bottle of water has been sitting with the other 30 or 40 in the heat. And you don't know how long they've been there or where they've come from and all that kind of stuff. And it tends to sort of make sense even in one's mind, but it does in mine anyway, that there would be microplastics in these bottles, because they've been thrown around, they've been moved, they've sat there in the heat, and then finally you screw and unscrew the cap off, and then you're throwing more microplastics in it. So yes, there is microplastics in our water system, and we also know that here in Malta there is plenty of microplastics in our ocean, and obviously our tap water comes from our ocean. It also comes in part from our groundwater, but reverse osmosis plants are obviously taking water from the ocean. There is microplastics all around Malta. The Project Impact, which is a great project, identified all areas all over Malta where there were microplastics, and there were a lot all over the place. The highest concentration, in fact, were in the Grand Harbour, but we have the evidence here that we know microplastics are prevalent in our food supply and in our water. And so therefore we can offer you the solution from a tap water point of view is that your tap water filter is filtering down to 2 microns. And that means that you won't be getting microplastics if you're using tap water for drinking. And that filtration level is taking out your microplastics, which are anything up to 5,000 microns or 5 millimeters. So that's about it for tonight. If there are any questions, please do pop on and set us in the comments on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. Please do pop on with any questions or just to say hi. It's nice to see quite a few people here tonight. Thank you for coming. I hope you found it useful. We're going to be looking at some other subjects in the future. To let you know that currently you can save 15% off tap water starter packs using the code SAVE15. And you can order online at tapwater.mt, or you can also do it by email, hello@tapwater.mt. And you can even make orders by WhatsApp, and we can arrange either cash on delivery or BOV mobile to mobile. And if you've got any doubts about the tap water filter itself or any questions, first of all, there's a guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied with anything within 45 days, we actually collect it and give you a full refund, because 95% of people keep their taps. And if you've got any questions, please just message me or let me know in the chat. And thank you very much for being here tonight. I hope you've enjoyed a quick session on microplastics, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.